In February of 2026, two things happened within days of each other. One royal was arrested, and one royal quietly signed away the only house that was ever truly hers. The whole country watched the arrest. Almost nobody watched the signature, but the signature is the one I cannot stop thinking about, because put them side by side, and you are not looking at two stories. You are looking at one, a reign changing hands, and a family very quietly beginning to count. Before we go further, subscribe to Crown and Controversy, because what is moving inside that palace is bigger than any single headline. This is the quiet arithmetic of a new reign. And once you see it, you cannot look away. Now, you have probably seen the headlines. Anne dragged Camilla's son to court over Balmoral, a sealed final wish, read aloud in a silent room. Meghan erased from the records by a stroke of William's pen. Honestly, those videos are everywhere, and almost none of it is true. There was no lawsuit, there was no sealed folder. I went looking for the court filing the way you would look for anything real. It does not exist. But here is the thing. Underneath all that invented drama sits a real story. And the real one is colder, quieter, and far more interesting than the fairy tale. So let me tell you the real one. To understand it, you have to go back to the wound, because every story about this family eventually circles back to one woman, Diana, the young woman the whole world fell in love with. The one who walked into that marriage at 20 believing in it. And she said it herself years later in that famous interview. There were 3 people in it. She was not wrong. We watched it unfold in real time. The cold years, the public humiliation, the tapes, the confession on television in 1994 when Charles admitted the affair to the entire country. She was not imagining her pain. The nation watched it happen to her. And then, in August of 1997, a tunnel in Paris took the rest. She was 36. 2 boys woke up that morning without a mother. If you watched the funeral that September, you remember the part that breaks you still. A 15-year-old boy walking behind his mother's coffin in front of the entire world, hooves on stone, a nation holding its breath, and a small white card on the flowers that simply said, "Mummy." Most children grieve behind a closed door. William grieved on live television. He was not allowed to cry. He was not allowed to stop. And he never forgot who he believed had helped take his mother's happiness away. Now here is the part that, for years, felt like the world turned upside down. The woman so many people blamed for Diana's suffering did not fade away. She married Charles in 2005, and in May of 2023, at Westminster Abbey, she was crowned beside him. Queen Camilla. Honestly, if you had said that out loud in 1997, people would have laughed in your face. I am not going to pretend I can read anyone's heart here. No one outside that family can, but I can read what happened next. And what happened next is the real story those slop videos are clumsily trying to steal. So hold this image, a house with a long memory finally doing its sums. That is where we are going. Because here is what I think most people miss about William. He's not loud. He does not feud in public the way his brother does. He waits, he's patient, and he is methodical. And when he finally moves, he moves like a man who has already done the maths. And in September of 2022, when his grandmother died, William inherited something enormous. The Duchy of Cornwall, a private estate worth well over £1 billion. Overnight, the heir became the landlord, and one of the very first things he did with that power tells you everything. For almost 20 years, Camilla's younger sister, Annabelle Elliott, had been the interior designer for those estates. Hired by Charles back in 2005, the year he married Camilla, paid year after year to decorate the duchy's holiday, cottages, and offices. Real money, good money, a comfortable arrangement that ran like clockwork for 2 decades. And then William took over the books, and the next annual report showed something that had not appeared in nearly 20 years. A blank. Nothing paid to Annabelle Elliott. Her work, the palace said, was simply considered complete. Considered complete. Honestly, sit with that phrase for a second. Now, the official line is that there was no bad blood, that her job was done and the staff had learned what they needed. Maybe that is the whole truth, but you have to ask yourself why this name in this family in his very first season holding the purse. The papers called it routine. I call it the first subtraction, because once you start watching for it, the pattern does not stop. The sister leaves the payroll, and the door closes so softly you would miss it if you blinked. And here is what gives that subtraction its weight. Anne. Because Anne has the longest memory in that family. Most people read her as cold. She is not cold. She is the most disciplined person in that entire operation. And she carries this whole story from closer than anyone. Long before Diana ever met Camilla, Anne knew Andrew Parker Bowles. In the early 1970s, before he married Camilla in 73, Anne was involved with him herself. She lived a version of this story decades before it became Diana's. So when Anne watches the family draw a line between who belongs by blood and who married in, she is not guessing. She has been on every side of that line. I cannot tell you what Anne says behind closed doors, but I can tell you what she stands for, and the whole institution knows it. So that is the patient plan, not a decree, not a signed order in blue ink at midnight. Whatever the slop says, just a rein, changing hands, beginning to count. But of course, the people being counted do not just sit there. And that is where this gets genuinely interesting, because Camilla is nobody's fool. She spent nearly 30 years rebuilding her image, brick by patient brick, the quiet charity work, the careful interviews. By the coronation, a real share of the public had come around. She earned that the hard way. And in 2025, you could still see the human being underneath. At the Sandringham Flower Show, she talked about her garden and she called it the best therapy in the world. That is a real person in a real garden, trying to hold on to one ordinary thing. And that one ordinary thing is Raymill House. You have to understand what this house means. Camilla bought it in 1996 for £850,000 with her own money right after her divorce, before the Crown, before any of it. This is the one place that was entirely hers. Not a royal residence, not allocated by the palace, hers. The garden she calls her therapy is that garden. And in February of 2026, she moved it. Quietly, she signed the house over into a trust structure, the legal title held for her 2 children. The same few weeks, the whole country was watching her former brother-in-law get arrested. Sources close to her insisted it was not a sale, just formalizing a family arrangement. And maybe that is exactly all it is. But ask yourself why now. Here is what I think, and I will say plainly, it is what I think. There are a few ways to read this, and every one is colder than the last. Maybe it is simple estate planning. Legal, sensible, the sort of thing wealthy families do. Maybe it is tax efficient and quiet and nobody's business but hers. Or maybe, and this is the reading I cannot get past, You do not pull the one thing that is truly yours out of reach when you believe you are going to win. You do that when you have already done the maths on losing. I could be wrong, but the timing points one way. And there is a detail that makes it sharper still. Around the same period, Charles himself quietly bought the house next door, the old mill, around £3 million of his own private money. Why? Because there were fears it could be turned into a commercial wedding venue, an Airbnb, a holiday let right on their private lane. So he bought it to stop that from happening. Now hold that thought because it matters in a minute. This family will spend £3 million to keep one royal home from becoming a business. Remember that. We are coming back to it. Meanwhile, far away in California, the other outsider went very quiet. Harry, Diana's lost son. And honestly, this is the part where I want you to hold two feelings at once, because his pain is real. In March of 2026, the writer Tom Bauer published a book about all of this, and in it, he reports that Harry now fears, in Bauer's words, that the future King William could remove the Sussexes' titles entirely. The book even reports a fear that it could one day reach his children. Harry's representatives rejected the book hard. They called the author fixated, said he had crossed the line. So take it as what it is. One author's reporting firmly denied. But notice what even the denial cannot hide. The fear itself is real. The outsider across an ocean is doing the same maths everyone else is doing, wondering when the counting reaches him. So that is the resistance. A queen moving her one true asset. A son across the sea, bracing. Everyone quietly bracing. And then comes the reckoning. And the reckoning has a name, Andrew. Because here is the thing, the fairy tale videos get completely backwards. They invent a punishment that never happened when the real one, the genuinely staggering one, was sitting right in front of them the whole time. Andrew is blood, born to it. The Queen's son, second in line for the first 22 years of his life. If anyone was untouchable, it was him. And watch what the family did anyway. In October of 2025, he gave up his titles. Days later, Charles stripped the rest. He was no longer Prince Andrew, no longer Duke of York, just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He lost the name. Then he lost the house, forced to surrender his lease on Royal Lodge, the home he had clung to in Windsor for years. And then in February of 2026, on his 66th birthday, he was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The first senior British royal arrested in nearly 400 years, and his own brother, the King, did not lift a finger to shield him. Charles said it out loud in a statement of stunning bluntness for a monarch. "Let me state clearly," he said, "the law must take its course. That is not a fairy tale. That happened. And it is colder than anything the slop could invent." Now here is the detail that ties the whole thing together. After his fall, it was reported this June that Andrew had been making money by subletting cottages on his rent-free estate. Read that again. The real scandal about commercialising a royal home was never Camilla's son and Balmoral. That was invented. The real one was Andrew, quietly renting out the grounds he was living on for free. And remember what Charles did for Camilla's private lane. He paid £3 million to stop a house becoming a business. The contrast is the whole story. Protect the home that is loved. Let the one who turned it into a business fall all the way down. So now look back at all of it together. The sister. Off the payroll, the house moved into a trust. The titles subtracted one by one, the arrest, the fear in California, and ask the real question. Who is doing all this? And the unsettling answer is maybe nobody has to. Here is the twist the Loud videos never reach because they are too busy inventing a villain. There's no secret order. There's no midnight signature. The reckoning everyone is craving is not an act. It is a rule. A consort's standing belongs to the reign, not to the person. What the crown lends, the crown calls back. Nobody in that palace has to move against Camilla's family. The structure does it on its own. A reign ends, and what was borrowed against it ends too. Andrew proved it first. In this family, even the born to it can be subtracted. So what chance does the merely invited in really have? That is the quiet arithmetic. And it has been running the whole time under every headline, real and fake. Now, I want to be careful and fair here. Nobody has thrown Camilla out of anything. She is the queen. She has real protection, real standing, real public affection she built herself. I am not telling you she has lost. Today, she holds the title, but I will tell you what I believe is coming. And this family's own history is standing right behind me when I say it. What is borrowed gets called back. And the day that arithmetic reaches its conclusion is not a question of if. It is a question of when. Because in the end, this was never revenge. Revenge is loud, and this was silent. There was no war. There was only a family slowly remembering the difference between who belongs to it and who it once invited in. And every quiet subtraction, the sister, the house, the titles, tilts the balance back one notch toward the boy who walked behind that coffin. And toward the mother he was walking behind, she lost everything in a Paris tunnel. But her son inherited the kingdom. And one by one, the people on the other side of that old wound are being counted out by a rule older than any of them. So let me leave you with this. Where were you the night Diana sat in that room and said there were 3 people in her marriage? I read every comment. Tell me what you remember, because the woman the world doubted that night is winning the long argument now, quietly, without saying a single word. And that honestly is the only verdict that ever mattered.